human culture, in human history, in every single ancient civilization, you will see human sacrifice. You will see it because at some point in human evolution, human beings just thought, you know what, the greatest substance on earth must be the blood of something and the letter of someone. It's so interesting because even in Jewish theology, not Christian, in Jewish theology, there is a concept of life. They tell you that the life of a human is in his blood. The life of the animal is in his blood. So if you want to propitiate, you want to offer the greatest thing that was around you. So they will use blood. And this is not a Yoruba thing. This is a human thing across cultures. You find it among the Mayans in South America. You find it in Egypt. You find it in China. You find it in Sweden, in Denmark. You find it in England. Human sacrifice is part of human history. But at some point in our own history, we evolved. And we're like, you know what? We're going to have to stop doing this. We did all kinds of things. Some of those things gory, if you look at it today. Oh, human sacrifice, twins. And by the way, it happened in Europe as well. Because what people don't understand, they tend to want to destroy. People don't understand the concept of multiple birth. Back then, it happened in many Asian cultures. The idea of deformity, for instance, if you were born deformed in ancient Greece, you would be thrown in the forest. Because, and why would that happen? Because if you were deformed as a child, you would require a lot of attention. Now, these were people who they have to go to the farm. Number one, you're not helping anybody because you're deformed. Number two, you're going to require a lot of attention. That means you're wasting people's man hours. You're wasting their man hours. Therefore, they would rather just abandon you to get unalived. This happened in Europe. This is Greek history, by the way. So the idea of if you were like deformed, of course, then if your birth was unusual, combating multiple birth, in different cultures around Africa, they also tend to be like, no, this must be, maybe we've done something against the gods. The difference in Yoruba land is that at some point in our no, Samek, I'm not explaining away savagery. You also understand life if you read. By the way, the book you shared earlier, you should have read the next line. You didn't read it. You just wanted to saga. That's why I'm sorry. I'm actually doing this because I just thought it was necessary, not because we're that intelligent. But let me continue. The unaliving of people that happen all over the world, it's bad though, just like slavery, but it's part of human story. It's not a uniquely African thing. Because if you're also African, one of the things that Europeans will say to you is that you do this. But the reason someone like you will feel inferior and feel like, oh, we did it, is because you don't know that their own ancestors did the same thing. It happened across the history of the world. But at some point in our own evolution, we came up with the idea of using the blood of animals instead of the blood of people, of human beings. And we did that not because of outside influence. We did that all on our own. We did that based on our philosophy, which is espoused in Ifa. And then we'll talk about you. So the difference between Yoruba and you is that you guys were not having human sacrifice. You guys were literally eating people. So you look at Benin, for instance, and you can read this book called City of Blood, or read another book called Great Benin, Its Customs, Arts, and Horrors by a man called Henry Lingroth. Read the book by Henry Lingroth. When Henry Lingroth described human sacrifice in Benin, it wasn't like what you find in other places. So in other places on earth, people would, even among the Scandinavians, they will find a way to persuade the people that they want to unalive. And those people will give themselves over and say, you know what, for instance, when you hear the concept of Abobaku in Yoruba land, people say, oh, you Yoruba people do this thing. It happened the same way in Scandinavia, in Sweden, in most of Europe. They will say that this earl or this rich person or this aristocrat is gone. Jeffrey, don't worry. I'm doing this because you cannot read. Your parents wasted the money paying your school fees. So I'm trying to tell you the story without reading. But I will still read. And when I read, it will be worse. So just take it like this first. Because there are books. And you have asked me questions, so I'll answer the questions. When people, let's say an aristocrat passes, it doesn't have to be the king. just like a very rich person. They'll say, we want to go with this person, we want to go to Valhalla. If you understand the Norse mythology, they want to go to Valhalla with their master. And those people will go gladly. And the way they will unalive them, usually a slit to the throat. They just slit their throat and that's it. It was bad though, but it was humane. If there's anything like that in human sacrifice, it was humane. What you found in Benin was not humane at all. It was gory. If you read a book called, and maybe I'm just going to open it so that we can get into this a little bit. What you will find is that people will be clubbed to death. People were crucified. For instance, if rain was not falling, they will use human beings as sacrifice, and then the woman called you also. Those European history was from 1,000 years ago. We're talking about 1900s. Wait, you're talking about 1900. I want to tell you about 2024. 2024. Just hold on. Don't be in a hurry. Oma told you see and then they will offer them as sacrifices. In Benin, you see, Henry Lingard talked about how the entire street was dotted with corpses when they were going out of town. People were dropped here and there. Pits were dug to just throw people in, and you just have this very terrible kind of situation. So that's what you found in Benin. And again, I'm going to read that book once I'm done with this. This is introduction. I'll read the specific things later. So you see about how they were crucified on the trees, how they were strewn along town, how, for instance, in the palace of the kings you have a place where they dug places. How, for instance, the beads on an annual basis would have to be cleansed with the blood of people because they have to be unalived, and the blood has to mix with the beads that the king would wear. We can get into those ones. But you know what? As bad as Benin story is, it's worse than your people. And I'll tell you where it's worse. You guys don't even sacrifice them. You don't only sacrifice them to deities. You literally eat them. And the sad part is that it did not happen in antiquity alone. It didn't happen in the 1900s that you wrote alone. It's still happening in parts of your land. And I'm trying not to mention the specific place because there are human beings that have sense that came from your place, but they must be from a different family than yours. So the point is that if you look at your own history, there are people today who still cannibalize. There is a map on cannibalism in your region. As a matter of fact, in this part of the world called Nigeria, and your place was literally earmarked. Like, I will bring everything out once Madam Masha finishes. So the concept of human sacrifice for you is not just what you did, it's what you do. And you don't just sacrifice to deities, you sacrifice to your stomachs. And so what that means basically is that there's very little value for life. And that's where you hear people. That's why it's not difficult for anybody to understand where cliffordology came from. So once you understand that this is the kind of place you are coming from, you will not come on my platform and tell me, do you know what Yoruba people did to slavery and human sacrifice? Because you don't even understand the first thing of it. So number one is the fact that when it came to human sacrifice, you sacrifice humans in death. You also sacrifice humans while alive. Sacrificing humans alive is when you come up with the concept of the caste system, where you make them osu. That is you sacrificing not just a person, but his entire lineage. You sacrifice his entire lineage and his children and his children's children, so that in 2024, a person could go on Twitter and tweet at Sheyi Law and say to Sheyi, you married an Osu, therefore your children are Osu. How can a human being say that in 2024? And what does it mean to be Osu? It means food for the gods. It means you are dedicated to them. It means that, and by the way, the first set of people that actually got to Lagos were from these people. So when you hear the word Nwosu, it's not a very good name. It's from, I'm still holding myself back, by the way. But the point is, so two things here. Your human sacrifice is both death and life. The death is in two ways. One is for deities, one is for stomach. The one for deities is bad enough. The one for stomach is crazy because it still exists in 2024. Like, you're still eating people. Why would you do that as a human being? And I'm going to read documents for you that mentions it. The other part is the one that talks about the lineages that forever they will never be associated with the other. They'll never be assimilated into the big group. That is a problem, because what you are seeing now is that you have a low caste You have a caste system that perpetuates not just classism, but perpetuates this inferiority amongst those people. You're not the one that will go and tell other people about their history. Having said that, let's talk about your slavery. So the sad thing about your slavery is this. And again, everything I just mentioned now, I will read it. If you cry, you will cry. The thing about your slavery is that whilst Yoruba people fought themselves and even took ourselves as slaves, and even attempted in some cases to get some people sold. But you know the funny thing, when you look at the history of slavery in the Americas, and please guys, listen to this. Of the slaves sold to the Americas, North and South of America, the Yoruba represents 9% of the entire number of Africans that were taken to the Americas. Guess what ethnic group has a larger percentage of people represented them? It's Igbos. The problem with that though is that, and this is a question that they ask, and you'll find this in the book on Yoruba and diaspora, and also in Adebanji Akintoye's book. And what he said was that, how do you explain 9%? No, 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 Samek, no, your own people are like 20%. And I'll tell you the reason. 9% of the people that came out of the country, sorry, out of Nigeria, if you look at the people that came out of Nigeria, not out of Africa, out of Nigeria, 9% of them were Yoruba. You're going to get your own very soon, Samuel. Just hold on. And the question has always been that how did the culture of the Yoruba people permeate the entire Americas, North in Virginia, in South Carolina, North Carolina, in Brazil, in Cuba, in all of those places? What you saw there was that they said, and I'm going to read it again once Madam Asha is done, that the number cannot account for the kind of influence that Yoruba people have because other groups like the Igbos were far more than them. So the question was that why was it that those ones do not have their culture survive the transatlantic slave trade? And they said it was because back home, the Yoruba came from a group of people who already had an advanced civilization. But the difference between them and you is the fact that you guys were stunted in your evolution. Like, you literally didn't have the concept of kingship. That's one. Number two is that it was also said that whilst Yoruba people, like every other group of people, by the way, it happened among the Gauls in France, it happened among the Greeks, it happened among the Romans, where they would even take their own, before Rome became an empire, where they would take their own and enslave them. That happened. The difference between every of these cultures I just mentioned and your culture is that you were not necessarily taking yourselves as slaves. You were a group of slaves. In other words, all people needed to do was to pick from yourself, from you, as you have a pool. You just pick one and sell. Pick one and sell. It's a pool. And if you've never heard me say this about people, and I'm even trying not to mention the ethnic group, it's because of respect. But if you've never heard me say this thing, I'm saying this because you cannot be stupid enough to constantly yap about people and about their ancestry and expect that nobody's going to respond to you. So let's respond to you. You guys, the name of your ethnic group, literally, the interpretation, the meaning of the name is slaves. But it should not be a problem to you because um, in Eastern Europe, there's a group called the Slavs. The Slavs were enslaved by the Ottoman Empire for 400 years, for 4 centuries, and they were so synonymous with the concept of slavery that in English language, the word Slav is the etymological roots of the word slavery. So slavery is from Slavs. But guess what? The Slavs are not going around the place crying about it. So guess what they have done? They have become better. They have, made themselves good. But while they are making themselves better, they were not going around insulting the British, insulting other people around. What you should have done is to say to yourself, if my name and my ethnic group is synonymous with slavery, how can I emancipate myself from these mental shackles that I'm still in? And then you make yourselves better. But that's not what you do. What you do is you go to people who have had a history before anybody thought of your mythology. By the way, let me also make it clear, your mythology is a recent invention, and I'm going to read it out to you because you're so dumb. You're saying that Yoruba people are saying this. Meanwhile, your entire mythology is a copy of Yoruba mythology. And I know I'm going to come back to the Fulani thing. Don't worry. The Fulani don't even have it in the dictionary. But again, you don't read, so you wouldn't know. So the point would be that you have an entire ethnic group who are actually a pool. And I'm sorry if this makes you feel bad. Again, I'm not mentioning any ethnic group, but the people I'm talking to, they know exactly who they are. You're talking about a pool of slaves. All you have to do is just to pick one. Anytime you needed some, just pick and take. And it was such a bad thing that it took somebody in 1853. Now think about it. 1853 was the year when let me put this in context. In 1835, the first newspaper was published in Egbaland, in Abeokuta, was spearheaded by a man called Henry Townsend, and he worked with a man called Bishop Ajayi Crowther. 1859 rather. Now, that was 1859. 6 years before they did this, something happened with Ajayi Crowther when he had to travel to a place that's not too far from Yorùbá land. But we've never had anything to do with these people. But because of Jesus and because of God, to the Lord, to the Jesus, he was like, I'm going to go preach to these people. So he traveled all the way to the place called Onitsha now in 1853. 6 years later, a newspaper will be published for the people that he belonged to. And when he got to meet these particular people, they were literally hanging on trees. They were literally just, jumping all over the place. And I'm going to read something because you cannot keep doing what you're doing in the comment section. I'm not going to respond to you. For the first time today, I'm going to respond to you guys. Just so you know that, yes, Busui is quiet, but you don't get to come here and be stupid. Like at some point, somebody has to tell you that, nah, it's enough. I've taken enough of it. It's been a few months. I've taken enough, and I think it's important to respond to you. If anybody gets angry about this, I'll tell you that this will not end with ancient history. It's going to come all the way into 2024. And I'm saying 2024 because I've not read any news about you guys in 2025, and I don't want to assume you stopped because something. No. Something happened on Monday. I was sit at home. Yeah, so you have still not evolved. But Mumbo, I'm going to read some things out to you. So I want Madam Masha to speak, so I'll read later. Just guys, just let me remember. Let me type everything I'm mentioning. I've talked about the group of slaves, the pool of slaves. I've talked about the fact that they account for more people that were sold into slavery in the Americas. I mean, this is the first time you will hear of somebody saying to you that they said we are better than you in slavery, so they bought many of us. Is the stupidity with which people just talk about those things. No, I'm not going to read from Yoruba books. I'm going to read from books by dispassionate observers, so it will show you exactly who you are. By the time Ajayi Crowther got there, they were essentially foragers. So just to be clear, in human history, many group of people have been foragers who, for instance, will live off the ground. They will not even really plant. All they will do is they would hunt, and then they would pick whatever it is that fell from the trees. So maybe oranges and fruits and stuff. They will pick it and they will, survive on that until maybe next planting season if they ever planted anything. So every human group has gone through that. Like cavemen, hunter gatherer. I mean, if you understand the evolution of humanity of humans, you understand the hunter gatherer phase. But as late as 1853, you had a situation where certain people were still at that level when Ajayi Crowther met them. It took him to say, you know what, this is how to plant crops. At that time, when he started planting cassava, again, cassava is not native to Yoruba land, it's not native to Nigeria. It was brought by the Saro missionaries and people from Sierra Leone, and also when they were come, and also cocoa. We'll talk about that some other time, but that one, of course, came from Brazil. So when they brought the cassava, we started, using cassava. I think it was also from the Portuguese as well, because they introduced it in Ishekiri as well. So we started having, cassava. We're planting. We're seeing what Baguda felt like, what Paki felt like. It was just being introduced into this particular region by Ajayi Crowther and his team. And when he did that, they also had to now teach them how to plant. And there was a reason they did that for them. And I will quickly read something. I'm holding myself back from not reading because once I start, I want to keep reading from other books. But I'm going to come back and read those things to you. But the point is that one of the things that he had to do, apart from the fact that he was the first person who wrote anything down in that language, again, I'm not mentioning the group, was also the first person who said, this is how to plant, because you cannot plant and harvest and then the rest of the year you are looking for fruit on the tree. You're not supposed to be living like arboreal animals. Like, you're supposed to be grounded, be on the ground and live here, and then plant and harvest. And so he himself and the missionaries that went with him, and I'm going to read that part before I let Madam Masha speak. He says, industrious habits have been encouraged. When we arrived at, 1857, I kept saying 1853. When we arrived at Onitsha in 1857, we found, oh shoot, somebody called me, sorry. We found the people in a state of idleness and with its attendant evils. They were scantily and filthily clothed and in a state bordering upon starvation, especially between the cessation of the old and the ripeness of the new crops. The old crops were barely sufficient to supply the scanty ones for 9 months of the year. In other words, 12 years, whatever they harvested could not last them for 9 months, right? And so it says the old crops were barely sufficient to supply the scanty ones for 9 months of the year. They did not grow more, although the exuberant fertile soil was ready to yield them a hundredfold increase in return before erosion set in. The remaining 3 months was a time of dearth and scarcity when they had to live upon fruits and other edible plants. The spontaneous produce of the fields, as might be found in the bushes anywhere. So they had to, for those 3 months, they had to look around. You find, fruit from here, trees from here, something from here, just jump up. This was in 1857. This is not ancient history. When I come back, I'll tell you the ancient part, then I'll tell you the recent part. This one is somewhere in the middle, but we'll take Kweju, just 1851, like yesterday. By the way, Azikiwe was born in 1904. So this is like 57 years before he was born. It's not like no, 47 years before he was born. It's not like it happened in ancient times. Which cassava did you have? Cassava was introduced to us by people. And stop doing this thing. You didn't have everything. Cassava is not native to Yoruba land, Efarabale. We also got it from someone. Don't be like these clowns who always say that everything is from us. Let's acknowledge where we got cocoa from outside, we got cassava from outside. I always say it, Oduduwa never ate eba because there was nothing like cassava until the 17th century. Even maize. Thank you, Lufon. There is a proverb in Yoruba land. Wọ́n sọ pé nǹkan ladìyẹ ń jẹ kí àgbàdo tó dé. Nǹkan ṣàlẹ̀yẹ ń jẹ kágbàdo tó dé. Was sold to Ijebus by Ishekiri around 1600s by Portuguese. Thank you for confirming that. A lot of worry. So if we get anything from anybody, just because it's in Ifa does not mean it's ancient. Again, Akaragun, another conversation. Maybe I'll say some things about Ifa some other time, and the way the thing was written. Cassava is not from Ife. Thank you very much. We don't have to lie about these things. We were introduced to cassava. We were introduced to cocoa. We were introduced to those things, right? And we appreciate the people who gave those things to us. We're thankful for the returnees that got back from Portugal, from Brazil. We're grateful for the Saros that got back from Sierra Leone. We're thankful for the Portuguese that sold those things to the Shekiri and got it to the Jebu people and then to the Yoruba people. We're glad for those things. And that's why we talk about Jebu Gari and Egba and how they like Paki and Ege. We don't have to attribute, what's the word? Appropriate those things. We have to have enough self-respect not to do that. But let's continue. The old crops were barely sufficient to supply the scanty ones for 9 months of the year. They did not grow more, although the exuberant fertile soil was ready to yield them a hundredfold increase in return. The remaining 3 months was a time of dearth and scarcity, when they had to live upon fruits. This was Ajay Crowder, by the way. When they had to live upon fruits and other edible plants, the spontaneous produce of the fields, as might be found in the bushes anywhere. But since the introduction of the cassava plant, cassava was another way they will say cassava. Since the introduction of the cassava plant into the country by Mr. Taylor and other fruit trees, and the people have been taught to raise a second crop of Indian corn, they just introduced agbado and cassava after 1857. These are the people that are talking nonsense to me on Nigeria happened to Yoruba people. I'm telling you, it's a shame. Since the introduction of Indian corn by Mr. John Smart, a scripture reader, and how to grow their yams better by the united example of all the mission agents. Who were the people that were growing yams at the time? It was Yoruba people. Some of them went with Ajayi Crowther on these missions. Some people that went with him were British as well. By the united example of all the mission agents, they have had enough to eat and to spare. The introduction of cassava plants into the country is universally acknowledged as one of the greatest temporal blessings brought to them. This is just the beginning of your history. No, I'm talking about how it was introduced to this particular group. And so the person who asked that question, your answer is coming, but it's going to be very full. This is my first book I'm going to read. I'm going to read others. By the time I'm done, one of the things you learn to never do in your life is to never make a mistake, not to. I'm going to mute you. Sincerely, you are disturbing me. Sincerely. It's one thing to keep saying that I think. It's another thing to be saying it emphatically, like you know what you're saying. We didn't have cassava in Yoruba land. Deal with that. And by the way, do you have to have everything in order to be proud? Every culture borrows from everywhere, right? The English breakfast is not even English. The English breakfast is not English. French fries wasn't made in France, and it definitely wasn't the kind of fries you expect. It's from Ireland. It's the potatoes from Ireland. People borrow things. Doesn't make it. Why are you always saying we did it, we did it? Don't be like Benin and Igbo people. Anyway, back to the point. So if people who were living like this in 1857 get to now come of age, because, and by the way, if any group ever complains about Nigeria, it should never be that group of people. It should, if there's any group that should be thankful for Nigeria, it's those people. And I'll tell you why. The reason is that it took Nigeria to to introduce civilization. So for us, for instance, I'll tell you that there's civilization in Yoruba land, then we got Europeanization. We were not civilized by the white people. We literally just got to understand how they did their things. But we already had our own civilization. But then you're talking about another group who it took the concerted efforts of different Yoruba groups plus the work of missionaries to help them. You are not the one that will come here and tell me. You were not even afraid. You actually came to my platform to tell me about Yoruba history. You must be dumb. So let's get into this. There's a particular clothes called Akwete today. Like, people talk about it like it was made. As at the 15th century, this particular material with the tortoise design was purchased by the Portuguese from the Jebu people. Madam Ashaja Pada, okay, I want you to speak now. I was looking for you. Was purchased by the Portuguese from the Jebu people, and they went up and sold it to the Ghanaians because they wanted gold. The Ghanaians now looked at that thing, and that inspired them into creating what we now call kente. Kente was inspired by the Jebu fabric that was sold to them by the Portuguese. But as the Ijebu people were selling it to the Portuguese, they were also selling it to another particular ethnic group in Nigeria. They were called the Ijos. The good thing about the Ijos, you find it in documents. Maybe I'm going to read some of it for you. You also find it even in their videos, recent videos. The beautiful thing about them is that they acknowledge where they got it from. The sad part is that the Ijos sold it to another group of people who now started making a copy of it. To be fair, the idea of fake products actually is not just today. Start making a copy of it and then said to everybody that they started it. Now, the Jebu did it. The Ghanaians were inspired by it. I won't call the Ghanaians own fake. You know why? They acknowledged the original. So once you acknowledge the original, let me tell you, I saw a video last week. One of the most stupid human beings I've ever seen on earth said something. He said that Nigerians are against fake products because of the ethnicity of the people involved. And then you will see sachets of pig milk that is not real, but that Nigeria should leave them alone because they have a different ethnicity. So the only reason you are against them is not because of the product in the pack, it's because they are of a particular ethnicity. So the idea basically is once you take something, you use the brand, an existing brand, and you claim it as your own, you are a fake product merchant. And again, it didn't start today. It's been decades in the making. By the way, like I said, the Yorubas already, I'm going to, maybe if I have the time, I'll show you some documentaries, archaeological work. that was done this 2024 in Ife. Two things were found while they were sifting through stuff. Two interesting, very important seeds. Number one was wheat. And the question was, how did wheat find its way to Ife in the forest in the 11th century? 10th, 11th century. How did you get wheat into Ife between the 10th and 11th century, knowing fully well that this land does not support the production of wheat? The second seed that was found was cotton. Cotton could be easily explained because up north, we have a situation where we have the savannah in Yorùbá. Like Yorùbá is such a blessed place where we have the coast, we have the water bodies, that's the sea. You find that from Lagos, which is Yoruba land, in case people want to buy. Lagos all the way to Ondo, all the way Ilaje, and even to our brothers at Ishekiri. And then you now come through the forests of the eastern and middle and central Yoruba, all the way into the savannah of the north. In the savannah of the north, we were producing cotton. By the way, after the American Civil War, one of the reasons the British wanted to do business with the Egba was because of cotton. So the idea of cotton has always been in Yoruba land. But then the question is how come they had this in the 10th, 11th century? And then in their findings, they discovered that these people already had a clothing industry as at the 11th, 12th century, where they were spinning yarns and making clothes in Ife. Other Yoruba people like Ijebu were already selling clothes to Portuguese in the 15th century. Look at the timelines, though. Then a people who were seen in the 19th century, more than 900 years after a clothing industry has been established in Ife, who are filthily dressed and mostly naked, is looking at me on Clubhouse, on TikTok, telling me that they want to tell me the history of Yoruba people. You must be dumb. Because this is you still being naked less than 200 years ago. And then when you got the pattern that is now equated, and again, I'm not mentioning any ethnic group. If it's eating you, it's because you are the one I'm talking about. You now call it equated based on what has been done by Ijebu, which has been copied by two other groups who acknowledge where they got it from. The Ghanaians, who do Kente, and the Ijos. Both of them acknowledge where they got the idea from. They said we're buying it from them, and then we said to make our own. But then you now have this other group who bought it from the Ijos, who were already wearing something before they started wearing something. And then they started wearing it, but they didn't start making it when they started wearing it. After some time, they now learned how to make something, copy this tortoise pattern, and then tell the entire world, listen, we made it. And say the gele, for example, you say on Yoruba women's head is somehow related to Achafu. So the real issue here is this. Nigeria happened to Yoruba people. And what Nigeria did, like Yoruba people will say, is that we have somehow found the pigeons mixed up with chickens. So that instead of the chickens to fly, instead of the pigeons to fly, the chicken actually tells the pigeon that, guess what? Your mother hatched you the way they hatched me. Therefore, you're supposed to be on the ground. And at this particular point in our conversation, we have to start telling some people, you were born to walk on the ground. Some people were born to fly. It doesn't mean they are being superior when they choose to fly. You should embrace your destiny of walking. You were born to scratch the ground and look for what to eat in the ground. If you've ever seen a pigeon flying, he's not telling you he's superior. He's telling you he's fulfilling his purpose. Your purpose is to till the ground with your scratches. His own purpose is to fly everywhere he wants to go. So the way this works is that you stay on your lane with your miserable history and enjoy whatever it is that you want to have fun with amongst yourself. And I'll say this, whatever is happening to you in your life today is not a curse. It's an opportunity for you to bequeath something better to your grandchildren. Up until the 1940s, Azikiwe would not even associate himself with that particular group. He always said everybody was from Onitsha, and he would say himself and that group. He never said he was from there. And that's why till today, there's some nonsense happened on Twitter a couple of days ago where people from Anambra were saying something about this other group. And they were saying all kinds of things. There's a reason for that superiority, is to delineate from the other larger group. And so if, for instance, people are now talking their history, what you have noticed is that you have seen this pigeon who tells you, my father taught me to fly. My mother taught me to fly. I should not be in this cage, so I want to get out of there. What you should do is to say two things. Either you tell the pigeon, fly off because you are born to fly, or you keep short and you concentrate on your own tilling. What you will not do is find a way to convince the family of the pigeons, in this case Yoruba people, and tell their children that those children were born to scratch the floor just because that's your own destiny. That is your destiny. Embrace it. And guess what? If you really understand purpose, you will scratch the ground and make it look like Dubai. And what you should be doing is looking for how to scratch. How else can I scratch to make this place better? What are the newer ways and technology of scratching the ground? You go everywhere asking, how do I scratch? How do I scratch? You get books, how do I scratch? Don't tell the pigeon to do what you have been born to do. That is your destiny, not the pigeon's destiny. And today, like I said, I don't even think I want to do Lori again. I'm going to read books. My car will sue everybody because I got angry today. And I got angry because somebody who should not even be, some people are so tall. They are so tall. They're not higher than the foot, than the soles of some other people. In other words, the extent of your height is still beneath the soles of some people's feet. So if the people who are just walking on their own, they know they are tall, they know that they don't say they are tall. So your Bible will not say I'm taller than you. Why? Because how do you compare something that is not as high as the sole of your feet with yourself? That is demeaning to that thing, and also tells you that you have a problem to bring yourself down to that level. So you never have this comparison. So if, for instance, you have decided to fear by telling people that, hey, look, let me tell you your history about this, about human sacrifice, about slavery, you will so hear history today in your life. When you hear Yoruba, and so these books have been carefully curated for moments like this, and they will be read well. And what you will notice is that whether we're talking about ancient history, pre-colonial history, history of Nigeria at amalgamation, I mean, think about this. Is infuriating. 1960, this is 2025. 1963. Anybody, please let me type this in the comment section. I want to make sure it actually dawns on us. Please type 1963. 1963. I want to first calm down because Simbama song missing. Let me tell you what happened in 1963 in Nigeria. 1963 was the year that Nigeria became a republic. That was the year Nigeria became a republic. 1963. Guess what else happened in Nigeria? 1963 was the year that a man, a very smart guy, a very smart man by the name Michael Okpara, came up with an edict in 1963. My father was already a businessman. So this is not ancient history. 1963, Nigeria was independent for 3 years and became a republic in that same year. That same year was the year where Michael Okpara said released an edict. Guess what the edict was? Nobody must come to the market in Enugu naked. If you come to the market in Enugu naked, you're going to be arrested. 1963. You will be the one to come on TikTok to tell me my history. There's something wrong with you. The concept of second-hand clothing literally actually happened because of the edict of 1963. Before 1963, nowhere in Nigeria did you hear the concept of second-hand clothing, whether it was in the south or in the north. Why? Because the people made their own clothes. Let me tell you something about my own family. We did not know anything about second-hand clothing until I think I was in uni. And how did I know? Because I now saw people, I used to see these fantastic designs, and I'm like, where do you guys get these things from? They say, we just bought it. And I'm like, oh, this is really cool though. When I was growing up, you know what we used to buy in the 80s, what my mother used to buy for us? What else? They used to call it in Yoruba land. They would say ready-made. So it's either the tailor is making something for you or you're having ready-made. And you would understand why. I mean, think about it. The first major fashion designer in Nigeria is Yoruba. His name is Folashade Thomas, I think. She was in the UK, had fashion parade. At the time, Jesus is Lord, at the time that Folashade was having fashion shows in the UK, she's from Oyo. At the time she was having this fashion show, clothes that she made, there were people who were going to the market naked. You would be the one to tell me Yoruba history. Are you sane? So Folashade was doing this, got back to Lagos, started this huge fashion, empire, grew to do lots of fashion shows in Lagos. And then you notice that even till today, you still see women, Yoruba men, Yoruba women, especially women, doing a lot of fashion and all of those things. It's because Oti Walara Watipe. So growing up, we would wear what we call ready-made. Ready-made. We didn't hear about, you know what we used to call this thing in Yoruba land? We used to call it bossy koro. Bossy koro means that you have to go to a corner not to buy it. My mother used to tell me about bossy koro, bossy koro. That one of my cousins, she bought something, and the mom would say, bossy koro kinio, bossy koro kinio. When that is bossy koro, ìgbà tí ìtìjú lọ náà pè ní bend down select. Bossy koro means hide. You have to hide. You have to go to one lungu in order to buy it because it's shameful. Now, it is the people who got that by the magnanimity of other groups that would have the effrontery to literally just come up. Listen. If I say you have ancient history, is that